welcome to our final discovery evening for autumn 2024. Where has this year gone? It'll be Christmas before we know it. All of my trees are up and I'm probably going to put a Christmas jumper on before the end of the presentation. Anyway, my name is Helen Bryan. I'm part of the team here at Wildlife Worldwide. None of us would be here if it wasn't for the man that I'm about to introduce you to. So, Mr. Chris Breen, fresh back from his travels, literally landed yesterday, and he's back at work and he's put together this presentation, and he will be talking to you tonight about walking safaris in Zambia's Luangwa Valley. If you have any questions during the presentation, I shall be on hand to answer them through either the chat or the Q&A options. But other than that, I think I'm just going to hand straight over to you, Chris. Take it away. Take us to Zambia on this cold, wet, wintry evening.
It is cold and wet and wintry, isn't it? But it's, yes, anyway, yes, it is, but not inside, at least. That's the bonus, isn't it? You haven't got rain coming through the ceiling. At least I haven't.
Absolutely. Right, I'm going to leave you to it.
Thank you. Lovely to see everyone this evening, or at least to know that you're there. Thank you very much for joining us. Those of you that know the company reasonably well, which I think is certainly many of you that are on the presentation this evening, will know that our journey began, as Helen mentioned, in the Luangwa Valley, where I was lucky enough to work for a couple of years after having finished university. And completely and utterly fell head over heels in love with the place. Anyway, the long and the short of it is that I then started Wildlife Worldwide on the back of my rather magnificent experience out in Zambia, and then subsequently some other lovely places around the world too. So I'm here to talk to you about walking safaris in Zambia, and most particularly in the Luangwa Valley. In fact, that's the area that we're going to concentrate on tonight. I'm sure you all know where Zambia is, but for those of you that the small number of you that may not, just to put it in context, you can see the map of Africa here. You can see Zambia in central southern Africa, and this is the map of Zambia with all of its, or certainly some at least of its rather lovely national parks. And getting to Zambia is very easy these days. You can fly in via Johannesburg, via Nairobi, via Addis Ababa, via Doha, via Dubai, and a whole plethora of other places. So getting to Zambia is terribly, terribly easy. In terms of seasonality, because that's a very important part of wildlife viewing, as of course you are all aware, but most particularly it's an important part of walking safaris, because the walking safaris only operate in the dry season, and that is basically between approximately the middle of May and the end of October or early November, just depending on which particular camp or lodge or safari company you're staying with in the valley. So important point about that is that as we go through that period from May, middle of May through to the end of October and early November, the country, and the Luangwa Valley particularly, since that's where we're talking about, gets hotter and it gets drier. As it gets drier, so the animals tend to congregate at the main river, and that, from the point of view of a walking safari, or arguably any safari at all, is a particularly good thing. So just zooming in here a little bit, I'll point out that the three key national parks in the Luangwa Valley. One here is South Luangwa, which is the largest of the national parks. Then there's North Luangwa National Park, which is here. And then Luambi National Park, a small park that sits in between the two, in between South and North. South Luangwa, North Luangwa, and Luambi National Parks are the three key national parks in the Luangwa Valley. And between the three of them, they account for an area of about 15,000 square kilometres. But around the outside of the national parks is a buffer zone. Technically, it's actually a hunting area, though that is changing over time. And there isn't a great deal of hunting that happens here, thankfully. But the wilderness area in the Luangwa Valley is an area of approximately 30,000 square kilometres. It is an absolutely vast, vast area. Relatively speaking, there are few camps here, and the majority of the camps are located in and around the Mfui area, which you can see indicated here. But most of the valley, most of the national parks are actually, most of the national park area, I should say, is free of camps and lodges. But there are some, of course. And it's one of the things that makes the region unique. Other things that make the region unique are the endemic species that there are there. The giraffe, thorny-crossed giraffe, is endemic to the Luangwa Valley. And crawshay zebra is endemic to the Luangwa Valley. And of course, the wild dog population. The wild dog population in the South Luangwa National Park is deemed to be the highest in terms of any of Africa's national parks. So now that's a question. There we are. That's better. So a couple of aerial shots of the Luangwa River, because I think that's quite important. It gives a good idea of a good impression of what the Luangwa is like. The river itself is a big, old, slow-flowing river. It's laden with silt, and in fact, it is now, I think, the largest of Africa's rivers that has not been affected in any way in terms of boundaries and borders by man. And as the park goes, or I should say, as the parks go, there are also no boundaries. So the western, there are no man-made boundaries, I should say. The western boundary of the national park is an escarpment. It's one of the ends of the Great African Rift, and the eastern boundary of the national park, South Luangwa, this is the river itself. So the eastern boundary of the park changes and moves periodically as the river changes and moves too. So we're here to talk about the park. We're here to talk about what makes this place special. And you will have noticed both on the previous image and on this one, the twists and turns of the river. You can see here, this would have been the original course of the river. The river has cut through. This is in the dry season, clearly, but this is now the main course of the river, and this is an oxbow lagoon. This is one of the things that makes the Luangwa Valley a particularly special place, because these lagoons have very rich soils around them. You can see it has trees, but it's also quite scrubby, and that is particularly good for the small antelope species. And because there's a lot of small antelope species, there are also a lot of predators as well, which is wonderful, and particularly leopard and particularly lion, in addition, of course, to the wild dogs, which I mentioned previously. Most of the camps and most of the lodges offer morning walks, morning walking safaris. The morning walks are fabulous, and they are well worth doing. But what I'm here to talk about is a more comprehensive walking safari that you can do by spending time staying at some of the walking safari camps in the valley. And the walking safari camps, which are quite specifically located away from the driving areas of the park. So it's all very well going on a walking safari, or I should say it's all very well being out on foot, which is lovely. And it's something that I really look forward to when I go out to Zambia. But being on foot is one thing, and seeing vehicles in the distance is annoying, but being on foot, knowing you're in an area that is completely remote, where there are no vehicles allowed, where it's basically just you and the wildlife and your guides, is a truly different experience, and one that is infinitely more pleasing. So I'll explain to you how the walking works. And typically, the walks would be probably 3 to 4 days, or I should say 3 to 4 days staying out in the walking camps. Sometimes more, sometimes less. Sometimes people only want to go to the walking camps for a night, sometimes only for 2 nights. My preference is to go for longer. And that's because we see more, we learn more, we spend more time being immersed in the wildlife of the area. First things first, we have to meet the guide. This is a particularly wonderful friend of mine, a guy called Alex, who runs a couple of the camps in North Luangwa. Alex is a brilliant guide, one of many, and some of his contemporaries, Makupa, Amon, and others, Brent, Jason, and various of the other guys, have been leading walking safaris for many, many years. And the way that the system works in Zambia and in the Luangwa Valley particularly is that in order to become a walking safari guide, you have previously to have been a driving safari guide, and prior to that, you have previously to have been a what they call a transfer guide. So you're allowed to take people to the airport and so on. There are many years of training before Alex was able to become a guide, or Amon and Makupa and the other guys were able to become guides, and many years of apprenticeship. And the knowledge that these guys gain and the knowledge that they build up over those many years is quite exceptional. And for me, they set the standard for all of the guides, in all of the camps, in all of the lodges, in all of the countries that we work in. And I'm certainly not suggesting that there aren't outstanding guides all around the world and outstanding guides that we work with, because there are, without question. But it's against these guys like Alex and Amon and the others and the team here in the Luangwa that I tend to compare everybody else. And these guys are right at the top of the tree. On a walking safari in the Luangwa, you always have an armed scout. And the armed scouts are in themselves exceptionally knowledgeable about wildlife, and they are exceptional trackers. These guys are, again, right at the top of their right at the top of their game. They're right at the top of the tree. They work very, very closely with the guides, deciding which particular route we're going to take, depending on what they've heard and what they've seen. They might have seen some oxpeckers flying over. Well, the chances are that the oxpeckers are going to be looking for buffalo, and in this particular area, buffalo are followed by lion. So just a brief glimpse of an oxpecker flying over might cause us to change the course of our route, but it might ultimately lead to us seeing a lion or a pride of lions when we're on a walk. And that's fabulous. That's exciting. In the Luangwa, there's only ever a maximum of 7 clients on a walk, plus a guide, plus our armed scout, and there's also a tea bearer. He's a very important chap, because it's the tea bearer that gives us our mid-morning refreshment. The morning walks last approximately 4 hours or so. They aren't a route march by any stretch of the imagination. The objective is to enjoy the wildlife, to see the birds, to look at the tracks, and to really stop and to listen and to learn as much as possible about the place that we're in. The kind of things that we're likely to see, these beautiful giraffe that I mentioned earlier, thorny cross giraffe, endemic to the Luangwa Valley, is one of a number of different things that we'll see. We'll look at lots of other things as well. They, of course, are what will be described as plains game. So on a walking safari, we'll see all of the plains game that we are likely to see on a driving safari. But we'll see it at eye level. And as this image illustrates, it to some extent depends how tall you are as to whether you'll see things at eye level or not. Hippos are an important part of the Luangwa ecosystem. There are about 100 hippos per kilometre of river. So the cacophony of the hippos calling and the sounds of them coming in and going out of the water and their interaction is another very important thing and a really interesting thing, and something which, when you're seeing it on foot, actually makes a big difference. Elephants as well. We see lots of elephants. The gentleman that first started walking safaris in the Luangwa is a guy called Norman Carr, who sadly died many years ago. But he wrote a book called The Valley of the Elephants, all about the Luangwa Valley. At the time, there was a huge population of elephants in the valley. It was heading towards 100,000. I think it was about 80 or 85,000. There aren't nearly as many as that now, but in actual fact, and that's as various reasons, including poaching, which was rife in the mid-1980s. But in actual fact, there's a very steady and a very stable population, and there's very little poaching that happens in the Luangwa Valley these days, and hasn't for many, many years. And we see wonderful family groups of elephants. We have an opportunity on a walk to stop, provided the wind direction is right, and to enjoy watching elephants such as this big bull feeding on a tree. Or if we are sat or stood very carefully and quietly in the right position, we might see something like this. This was a wonderful sighting. We were at this location for probably 45 minutes or so. In actual fact, we'd stopped. It was a tea stop. We had some beautiful giraffes in the background, as you can see. So we thought we would stop for tea and watch the giraffe. And then we saw that there was an elephant who wandered across the river and ambled past us. That's wonderful in a vehicle, but it's even more wonderful when you're on foot. And of course, when you're on foot, you have an opportunity to look at things that you wouldn't look at if you're in a vehicle. For example, taking time to look at the tracks. This is a lion track. And to talk about how you can identify potentially male lions from female lions from the tracks. How many lions were there? How many lions were going past? Where were they going? What were they seeing? Were they running? Were they chasing something? Were they hunting? That kind of thing is not the sort of thing that you would do when you're in a vehicle. It's the kind of thing you have an opportunity to do when you're on foot. This was an encounter that I had a couple of years ago. This is actually a rock monitor. And there aren't all that many rock monitors in the Luangwa Valley, or at least I should say they're not frequently seen. They're very rarely seen. But this was a fantastic encounter we had with a rock monitor. And again, we were on foot, which was almost certainly why we saw it. We were unlikely to have seen it if we were in a vehicle. And we were with it for 10 or 15 minutes. It was fantastic. We also stop to look at, I would say, skeletons of a past life. I think that's probably a good way to put it. And look at the tracks of things that, well, see if we can work out who it was that took this poor, unfortunate animal. We can see that the spine has been gnawed. Obviously, it was killed some time ago, but the spine's been gnawed almost certainly by hyenas. But other things will have had a go at that too. We can have a look and see how it's gradually decaying. We can talk about its teeth. We can talk about the horns and the hair. It's quite interesting. This particular one, although it was some time previously that it was killed, it wasn't such a long time ago because there's still lots of hair on the face. Those kind of conversations, potentially very interesting conversations, aren't things that we would necessarily do if we're in a vehicle. And of course, this skeleton is gradually going to be absorbed back into the soil, and the conversation that we can have about it if we were to see it next year isn't the same as the conversation we'd necessarily have this year. So that in itself is one of the interesting things. And I personally have a great love of birds, which has come to me from having spent time in the Luangwa Valley. And like many people who are interested in birds now, but who weren't previously, this was the bird that got me into it. This is a lilac-breasted roller, arguably one of the most beautiful birds in Africa, but with just about the ugliest call of any bird there is. But having an opportunity to look, to enjoy the birds, to take things at a slower pace, and to enhance our knowledge is something that we relish in when we're on foot. Carmine beaters, another of the birds that encourages people into looking at and thinking about and talking about birds. Carmine beaters nest in the Luangwa Valley in huge numbers, and as luck would have it, they nest in the Luangwa Valley at prime walking safari time. So if we were to go on a walking safari anytime from mid-September onwards, then we will see significant numbers of carmine beaters, and sometimes the colonies of carmines are many thousands strong. It's not just the colorful birds that we're looking at when we're out on safari. We're looking at the raptors. This is a male battler. He's at least 7 years old. We can tell that because it's got its full adult colors, and it has almost no tail, which is something that only the adult battler eagles have. The younger battler eagles have a longer tail because they need them for stability, and they have to learn how to fly without the tails. It enables them to fly much faster. For those people interested in birds, traveling to the area anytime from mid-September onwards is the perfect time to go, because that's when all of the migrant bird species will have arrived from Central Asia and Northern Europe. And it's when many of the resident birds come into their amazing breeding colours. But of course, we have to stop, and our tea bearer, Paul, in this case, will find us a lovely spot on the side of the river, or perhaps by a lagoon. He will make a brew. We will have a biscuit or a piece of cake that's been made and in camp, and we will enjoy a bit of rest and watch some of the wildlife come to us. In this particular case, on this walking safari, there was a nearby group of buffalo, and they were interested to know what was going on, and they ambled up to us. But it could be antelope, it could be elephants, it could be giraffe, it could be anything. Or we might just be sitting by the river looking at birds, or maybe we're sitting by the river looking at nothing other than the beautiful fresh African sky. It's a fantastic experience just sitting there and watching the world go by. And after we've had our coffee, we'll start to head back to camp, always looking out for wildlife in the area, which is plentiful. And this was a shot taken in North Luangwa. This is Cookson's wildebeest, another of the valley endemics. So we might return to camp, in this particular case, crossing over a shallow stretch of river, with our guide and our scout. This is the Mwaleshi River in the North Luangwa. Or our guide and our scout might lead us to a rather luxurious brunch stop set up in the middle of the river. This is in the southern part of the Luangwa, on a walk from Kapamba. But what a wonderful place to stop for lunch and have a drink before then heading back to camp. So I need to tell you a little bit about the camps too, because I don't want you to have the impression that the walking safari camps are anything other than um, uh, I don't want you to have the impression that walking safari camps are um, simple, um, uninteresting camps with no facilities, because they're not. The walking safari camps are set in beautiful locations, and as I said, they're in locations where there's no vehicles allowed, generally speaking. And this particular camp is called Big Lagoon. It's on the west bank of the Luangwa River, and it has really rather magnificent views. It faces east, so it gets a beautiful sunrise. It has everything you could possibly want, from solar lighting to lovely, comfortable beds and a beautiful bathroom, and of course, beautiful views. And this is another of the magnificent camps that we work with. This is a camp called Chikoko, and you can see that's on two levels. The bottom level is the dining and bar area, and the top is a lounge which overlooks a beautiful wide open plain. So the walking safari camps tend to be simpler than the lodges, um, but that's part of their beauty. But you have no fewer luxuries, in inverted commas. You have all of the same facilities, but some things are just a little bit simpler. Imagine waking up in the morning with this, in this lovely, lovely room, out, looking out through the trees. There's a plane off in the distance, and birds calling, hippos calling from the river. It's a magnificent experience. This is another of the camps that we work with. This is up in North Luangwa. This is a camp called Mwaleshi. This is entirely built from reeds and grass, again, all with ensuite facilities, and a gigantic picture window with no window. So from here, you're looking out onto whatever it is that comes along in the river, be it crocodiles, hippos, elephants, lions coming to drink, wildebeest, who knows? It could be any number of things. And this is the dining and bar area of that particular camp. Another of the camps that we work with is this beautiful camp. This is a camp called Takwela. And you'll see, I'm just pointing out here with my cursor, the rooms that are sitting on the edge of the river. This is at the confluence of the Mwaleshi River in North Luangwa and South Luangwa, and the Luangwa River, which then heads on through what's known as the corridor down into South Luangwa National Park. And this is an area where there are, generally speaking, hundreds and hundreds of hippos. In fact, I can show you with my cursor, there's a huge pod of hippos here. There's another pod over here. There's a great line. There's a little sandbank along here, and there's a huge line of hippos all the way along here. So another fabulous spot, another beautiful camp, and a walking safari camp. They're all slightly different. They all have their own enchanting features, and they all have fabulous food, I have to say. So those are all camps that are pre-established, that pre-exist. But there is another way of doing a walking safari as well, over the same sort of period of time, 4 or 5 nights, and that's doing a mobile safari camp. And in one part of the Luangwa Valley, we work with operations there, and they do a 5-night walking mobile safari. You walk from camp to camp to camp. The camp is much more simple, although all of the tents have private facilities. They're technically not en suite, but they all have private facilities. Again, lovely, comfortable tents and so on, nicely appointed inside. But when you leave for your walking safari first thing in the morning, the camp crew pack up the camp. They disappear off into the distance, and by the time you arrive at the next camp, it will already, next camp location, I should say, it will already have been established. So one of the great things about staying at the walking camps is that after brunch and after a siesta, you can walk in the afternoon. And I have to say, my favorite walks in the day are the afternoon walks. I particularly like them. They are generally 2 to 2.5 hours long. And I particularly like them because that's the time of day when things are getting cooler and the light is always getting better. If it's hot when you begin, you know it's gradually going to get cooler. If you enjoy photography, you know that for almost the entire duration of your afternoon walk, you're going to be able to get better and better pictures. And again, as with all the other shots I've shown you, these are all taken on foot. More wonderful opportunities to see ellies. It's just more time out in the bush. In this particular case, there was a curious hippo or two. And of course, there are plenty of antelope to see. This is puku, an antelope that you get in, it's one of the cob species, an antelope that you get many of in the Luangwa Valley. It's a particular, it's a water-loving antelope. And you get them down on the Chobe River as well. And other lovely antelope you might see when you're on a walk, on an afternoon walk, let's say, these beautiful greater kudu. And on my most recent trip to Zambia, which was only a month or so ago, roan antelope. And this was up near one of the walking camps in the northern part of South Luangwa. We don't see roan antelope all that often, but we do tend to see roan antelope towards the end of the season. They're quite skittish and they like to stay relatively close to the western boundary of the national park, to the Mchinga Escarpment. But as it gets hotter and drier, they start coming down towards the Luangwa River, and there's a group of between 40 and 45 roan antelope that come down day in, day out from about the mid to the end of September. And we were lucky enough to see this particular group, certainly the biggest group of roan antelope I've ever seen. Come the end of the day, we will either end up back at camp, but we might sometimes end up at a beautiful river spot like this for a sundowner drink. So quite often people ask me whether we're likely to see predators when we're on a walking safari. So consider this. Of course, the answer is yes, we will see predators. We're not going to walk away from predators. We'll ensure we remain safe. But predator viewing on foot is incredibly exciting. There are only certain people that I would feel very, very comfortable looking at predators with on foot. But in the Luangwa, everyone I've been out with, I felt comfortable with, and the predator viewing is fantastic. So this was a morning walk. We had to go across the river by boat, this rather nice Canadian canoe, in order to start our walk. But before we began the canoe journey, we could hear lions calling, and we knew they were on the other side of the river, and we wanted to get to where the lions were. We weren't sure how long it was going to take to get to them. We weren't sure whether we were going to see them because lions can be quite skittish when you're on foot. And there's never a guarantee that you're going to see predators when you're on foot, but it's particularly fantastic if you do. Anyway, it didn't take us long to get to where the lions were. There were actually 2 lionesses. This is one of them. She wasn't all that far away from us, but she was a bit curious. And she didn't hang around for all that long. The lioness that she was with moved off a little bit quicker. They stayed relatively close to us, but they kept themselves well and truly hidden. we had a feeling that there were more lions than just the 3 females. And although it took us a little bit of time to see them, we then found some more. So I'll move my cursor out the way for the moment. Hopefully you can see these two guys. But if you can't, here's one male lying down in the grass, hiding behind the grasses, looking at us. And here's another, both relatively young males. And this was 2 of 3, 3 beautiful lions. We actually spent an extended period of time with these lions. We were with them probably for 20 or 25 minutes, and it was a fantastic encounter. Absolutely fantastic. Very exciting. I wouldn't say that it was frightening or scary in any way. I'm lucky enough to have done it a number of times. I know that some people felt a bit nervous, but it was just beautiful. It was a fabulous, exciting encounter, looking at or being at eye level with one of the apex predators. The following day, we went back to the same area, and the lions had killed. And in actual fact, they were on a buffalo, and we were with 12 or 13 lions. We were probably 25 meters away from them. And although they knew we were there, a couple of them moved away. About 10 or 11 of them remained on the kill, and we were able to stand at a safe distance and just watch. And they weren't interested in us. They were only interested in what they were eating. It was fantastic. Wild dogs, we see wild dog when we're out walking as well. Not so often as we do lions, but we do see them. This was on a lovely afternoon walk in North Luangwa. On this particular trip in North Luangwa, which is the year before last, we had lions every single afternoon when we were on our walk, and we had lions around the camp, and we had lions on the morning walks. This was a big male that was actually part of a mating pair, but we had these lions every single day. And Mick and Alison, I know you are on board this evening. You will, I'm sure, remember this encounter. There were 5 of us on this walk, and it was the best leopard encounter on foot I've ever had. I've never had one like it before. I've never had one like it since, but we were lucky enough to come across a beautiful male leopard that was sound asleep in a tree. And because the wind direction was right, and in fact there was quite a bit of wind around, there was the noise of lots of leaves rustling. So us moving closer and closer to where this leopard was in the tree didn't disturb it at all. Obviously these are taken with a telephoto lens, but it was certainly the best leopard encounter on foot I've ever had. And when the leopard suddenly realized we were there, he was up and off in a matter of seconds. But that is something I will take with me to the grave as being one of my best ever leopard encounters. And it is possible, of course, to get close to vultures and hyenas and all sorts of other lovely things that are feeding on carcasses once some of the apex predators have left. Now, it's also important just to mention the lodges. So we've spoken about walks, we've spoken about the walking safaris and the walking safari camps, but it would be foolish, in my view, just to do a walking safari and not top and tail your walking safari with a stay at one of the lodges. We work with all of the lodges in the valley. We tailor make trips to all of the lodges in the Luangwa, and we will try to fit you up with the lodge that we think's most suitable for you, with the benefit of our experience. But staying at one of the lodges, and this is Tafika in the central section of the Luangwa Valley, a beautiful, well-appointed lodge. But staying at one of the lodges enables you to go out in vehicles. And although I'm here primarily to talk about walking safaris, it would be crazy to go to the Luangwa and not enjoy a vehicle safari as well. Vehicle safaris can get you closer to certain things. We would have been unlikely to see this aggregation of crocodiles, the largest aggregation of crocodiles that I've ever seen, if we'd been on foot, because I think they would have felt our vibration and I think they would have disappeared. So we stayed quite a distance away from them, but I stopped counting at about 225 crocs on this one hippo. This was incredible. We probably on foot wouldn't have had a lion encounter quite like this. There's nothing particularly special about the video that you're looking at. It's just that it comes incredibly close to us, which was lovely. Although I like seeing apex predators when I'm on foot, I do also want to see them again, and I don't want it to be the last time I see the apex predator on foot. So we're always very sensible about how we do it, but it is very exciting. But seeing lions and the predators is always just wonderful anyway. Beautiful lioness. And this is a leopard. Surprise, surprise. This is a leopard called Mutima. Mutima is a 3-year-old leopard. Mutima is the daughter of a leopard called Olimba, and Olimba is famous for having been on 2 or 3 absolutely outstanding BBC Natural History TV programs. This is Mutima, Olimba's daughter. Mutima will be famous this time next year because there's an hour-long TV program that's being made by a BBC crew. In fact, 5 one-hour specials, all about the predators in the Luangwa. And this fabulous leopard, Mutima, will feature very, very heavily. Well, we were incredibly close to this leopard, as you can see. Again, obviously that's with a long lens, with a 500mm lens, but even so, we were incredibly close. And she is not even slightly concerned about us or our presence. About 150 meters away, perhaps 200 meters away, her mother, Olimba, was hunting impala, in this case unsuccessfully, but it was a very exciting thing to watch, and unlikely to see that on a walk, to be fair. Elsewhere in the valley, also a month or so ago, there's another very famous leopard called Lucy, and Lucy had 2 cubs, and this image was taken at night, as you can see. Obviously, we're not allowed to walk at night, but we were able to get quite close to Lucy's cubs. So there are some real advantages of combining a walking safari with a driving safari. One of those, of course, is an opportunity to stop by the side of the river and have a sundowner drink after a lovely afternoon drive. And then once the sun's gone down, we turn the spotlights back on and see what's around. In this particular case, this is Vero's eagle owl or giant eagle owl. We might see some of the other night stuff. This is large spotted genet. We might see scrub hares, all common species. We might see porcupine, which are common but not often seen, curiously. And we might see lions out hunting. So look, Luangwa is an incredible place. I know a number of you on board this evening have been. Luangwa is an amazing place for wildlife viewing. It's an amazing place for photography. It's an amazing place for walking safaris. But it's also very important that we give back. And one of the great things about the camps and lodges in the Luangwa is that they are huge supporters of the local community. In fact, in almost all of the lodges, well, it is the case in all of the lodges, the vast majority of the staff, be they kitchen staff or reception team or or guides or scouts or mechanics are all employed from the local area. So our presence there is incredibly valuable. Our presence there is incredibly valuable for the wildlife, because if we're not going, then these guys who are so proud of their wildlife and so protective of it would obviously, well, A, not have a job, and B, from a conservation point of view, we would lose the wildlife. So it's very, very important that we travel to these amazing places, and it's very important that we are conscious of what we're doing and how we're doing it, and how we're giving back to the local communities. And the young kids in these places have some of the most amazing and wild aspirations, as you can imagine, for how their futures might pan out. But many of them, and many of them that those of you have undoubtedly met, will end up being top guides, scouts, drivers, boatmen, chefs, and goodness knows what else, and all to a very considerable extent because we are able to go there and enjoy the wildlife with them. So that's our Luangwa walking safari with a bit of driving thrown in, which I hope has whet your appetite for a visit. I'm often asked what you need to take when you're on a walking safari. Well, this is about it. And this isn't a group that was eaten by a pride of lions or anything like that. I think they were enjoying a coffee somewhere, but a wide-brimmed hat, pair of binoculars, camera, and a keen pair of eyes. That's what you need. That's all you need to have with you. And just to talk about a couple of particular trips, and I know Helen's going to come back in a second and jump back in. If you wanted to join me, I've got a couple of places left on a trip which I'm running in early September next year. I'll be running the same trip again in 2026. The dates are in the process of being finalized at the moment. That's called Walking in the Heart of Zambia. I'm leading that with my friend Simon Barnes, who is an immensely knowledgeable naturalist and knows the Luangwa Valley very, very well indeed. We spend 9 nights in the Luangwa, 4 days of walking safaris in South Luangwa and 2 days of walking safaris in North Luangwa. We have plenty of opportunity to drive as well when we're in South Luangwa. And on the back of trips in Luangwa, of course, there are plenty of extension options. You might consider going down to the Victoria Falls, which are beautiful, or the Lower Zambezi, or perhaps going into Malawi. Or as I did, I kind of went outside the envelope this time, and I went up to Zanzibar after having been in the Luangwa. That's a very nice combination, and went scuba diving. Perhaps not. That's perhaps not for everybody, but walking in the heart of Zambia, as I say, we have a couple of spaces left. If anyone's interested in joining me, I would be delighted to take you there. And then there are 2 other trips which have walking in them. First is the classic Luangwa walking safari, which is the walking safari making use of the safari tents, where the camp is moved from place to place. There are many departures of that during the course of the dry season. And then the other safari, which Helen is going to tell you about, Helen arrived on cue, perfectly on cue, is the Lure of Luangwa.
Yeah, hi. Well, first of all, thank you very, very much, Chris. You've just completely whetted my appetite, and I want to go back right now, if possible, please. Right, okay, so yes, it is my great pleasure to officially launch the Lure of Luangwa. Doesn't that have a lovely ring to it? Good use of alliteration to us grammar geeks. I have the great fortune and have been asked to lead this trip. There are going to be 2 departures in October 2026. We will fly into Umfui, as Chris has mentioned and shown on the map. We will then be heading south, and we will be staying at a combination of 2 utterly gorgeous bush camps Kapamba and Chindeni, and we will have a combination of vehicle safaris and also walking safaris. So I'm really, really excited about that. October 26th does seem like quite a long way away, but knowing us, it will be here before we know it.
Round the corner.
So it is indeed. So yes. Essentially, yes, it will be more vehicles than walking, but walking will certainly be an option, and one that I am very, very keen on. That you're quite right. There is nothing like the thrill of hearing a lion and then knowing that it is literally not
It's
far from
amazing.
you at all. Every nerve in your body just comes alive, and every sense is on absolute just high alert. And it is just one of the most exciting experiences I think you can ever have. So, yeah, walking safaris, they rock.
They do. They
They
do.
do.
Absolutely.
They
They really
do.
do.
Yeah.
Look, I don't know if we've got any questions, but maybe everyone's fallen asleep. You never know. They probably have.
They
Um,
have not. Yeah, again, you beat me to it. I was about to say, I wonder if you can help with a couple, please.
I'll do my very best,
So,
Helen.
right, while I ask you the questions, what I'm just going to do is launch a poll, and that poll will basically give you the option of requesting travel plans for one of the 3 trips that Chris has taken you through. The trip that he will lead with Simon Barnes, the trip that utilizes the mobile safari tents, and then also mine, the lure of Luangwa. So if you'd like information on any of those, please do get in touch. Now, so while everybody is busy, a couple of questions for you, please, Chris. Can you recharge cameras during your walking safari? How does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. All of the camps, so all of the camps have solar charging facilities. What I generally do is I take my camera, of course, surprise, surprise, when I'm on a walk, and I have a spare battery in my pocket. And then when I get back from my walking safari over lunch or brunch or afternoon siesta, I will put my camera batteries on charge, solar charging, and it's very, very good. On the mobile walking safaris, which we mentioned, classic Luangwa walking safari, they have a very similar system. So they might not be charging in your room particularly, and that varies. It depends on the camp. It alters from camp to camp, but there will be charging facilities more often than not in the bar area. So yeah, no problem. Easy to do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Also, is there an average age or fitness of walkers in your experience?
I would, well, in terms of fitness level, you don't actually need to be well, you've got to be able to put one foot in front of the other, but that's, as Monty Python said, is stating the bleeding obvious. But it's flat. The valley's flat. So the really nice thing is that you don't need expensive walking shoes, although some people like to wear walking shoes. You can wear you can wear trainers, sneakers. And therefore, from the point of view of fitness, we're not climbing up hills, we're not going uphill, down dale, we're not going over rocks and clambering over this, that, and goodness knows what else. Your fitness level doesn't need to be particularly high. And my favorite time of year for walking, it's only a personal favorite, my favorite time of year for walking, which is September and October, even though that's absolutely the hottest time, it's dry. So it's not oppressive. And it's brilliant. Yeah.
Brilliant.
So no major fitness level required.
And in terms of gear that you carry, you mentioned that there is always a tea man with you, but presumably you need to carry enough water as well as your binoculars, cameras. Anything else that you would say would be an essential other than the sun hat that you mentioned?
Everybody carries water, so you carry a bottle, traditional bottle of water, camera, binoculars. I always wear a wide brimmed hat when I'm walking. I didn't used to, but I do now, much better. I always have with me, this is not, well, I suppose this is the era that we live in, I always have my mobile phone with me, not because there's a mobile phone signal, but because it's great for photography as well as having a, either a budge camera or any other kind of camera. But nice for, group shots and that sort of stuff. And also on that, I have an app with all of the bird calls and, information about the wildlife, which is a lovely thing. So again, sometimes it's quite nice to be looking at those things when you're sat at tea. Otherwise, it stays firmly in my pocket.
Fair enough. Good stuff. Yeah, I think Peter's actually just reminded me of something that happened last year when we were out there on festival together, which is going to make me chuckle. But it's a lovely opportunity actually just to sit and watch things that you normally wouldn't, like velvet mites, for example. What Peter's reminded me of is basically we were stopped to look at some poo, of all things, and poo is actually fascinating. There is a book that you can buy on it called a scatalogue, which I think is genius. And he actually just said, if you gave me a stool, I could just sit here and talk about this all day. And then he didn't realise the pun until after he'd said it. And of course, I just dissolved, being the child that I am. But also, just a random question. I didn't know this, but you talking about your at least 225 crocs that you had on that hippo carcass, do you know what the collective noun is for crocodiles?
Oh, hell.
I didn't.
No, I don't actually.
I just looked it up. If they're in water, what you were looking at then was a float.
Oh, good heavens.
On land, it's a basque.
Oh, well, there you go.
How's that? How's that? There we are. There we are.
Always nice to learn something.
It is, always. Right, well, would you do me the honour of just moving your presentation on to the very last slide?
Beg your pardon. Yes.
I don't wish to tear myself away from those lovely Ellies, but we must.
We must indeed.
What I just wanted to say to everybody is that I cannot introduce next week's speaker because we have finished with the best. That's it for this year, but 2025 is around the corner and we will be launching our winter series very, very soon. In the meantime, if you'd like any of our brochures, we've also got new brochures coming out at the end of the year. You can get onto our mailing list to receive one because they will be packed full of wonderful articles written by us all. Thank you very, very much once again for voting that at the British Travel Awards and also at Wanderlust we received silver and bronze respectively for Best Nature and Wildlife Tour Operator. We couldn't have won that without your support, so thank you. But on behalf of me and Chris, we wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thank you once again for joining us, and we will see you in 2025.
Happy Christmas, everybody, and Happy New Year, as Helen says. Thank you for watching.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.